Red Barn, art for your yard. I gotta change that. Maybe art for your car? I don't know. Am I giving myself too much credit? Well, we'll have to see. Because after you see this, I think you're going to agree with me that this is art. Here's the latest madness happening here at the Red Barn. This is a Ferrari 360 Modena engine. About, 3.6 liter, about 400 horsepower, about 275 pound-feet of torque, and perfect, in my opinion, for a 914 swap. Why? Well, that torque thing, well, it also revs to 8,500 RPM. Who doesn't love that? I think we all have heard the screaming Ferraris and agree that flat plane cranks and 8,500 RPM equals audio porn. Anyway, so this is the LS3 that's been in my car, and what a beast it is. Great motor, don't get me wrong, but about 200 horsepower too much, and you get your foot, heavy into it, and you're breaking the law in a serious way. Not that the Ferrari won't do that, but the bunch less torque is going to mean you got to put more revs into it, which is great for a little chassis like this. And I will say, it's not going to go into my chassis. It would require so much rework that I just can't bring myself to do it. So another chassis has been sourced. But I wanted to talk about, a couple of people have asked some questions about the drivetrain, and I wanted to go over a couple things that I think you might find interesting. One, for starters, look at the thing. I mean, that intake manifold is ridiculous. It's like a foot tall. It's all about tunnel length, or intake runner length, and how it makes its power. It's got some really interesting features. You're probably not going to be able to see them, but I'm going to try. If you look in there, you can see there's a butterfly for each of the cylinders, but right next to it, there's another tube that looks suspiciously like another butterfly opening, but it's not. What it is, it's a tube that runs across to the other plenum, and then pops up over there and allows for air to flow in all kinds of crazy ways. And then there's also this flapper valve between the two plenums that gets actuated at a particular time and creates all kinds of other intake magic. I have a ton to learn about this motor, so if I sound like an idiot, it's only because I'm an idiot, but it's so freaking awesome. The finishes of the casing, or the castings, are also really interesting. I mean, you can't probably tell in the video, but it looks so much more like it was plucked out of a race car than the production stuff I'm used to seeing on like the LS and even some of the Porsche things. It just looks so purposeful, and it's just so beautiful, and all the cool little double overhead cam things and crazy stuff. But one of the other things that makes this really nice for a 914 swap is, I don't have my Boxster trans here. It's out getting some upgrades done to it, but if you look at how high the output shaft is on the transaxle, one of the things that you guys that have done Boxster swaps will know is that not only, at least with the Renegade kit, are the axles back behind the where the trailing arm axle input is, so you get a bit of an axle angle there, but it's also low because the input shaft runs to the top of the diff, where here you can see it runs to the bottom of the diff. And that puts the axles up higher in the car and in much better alignment with the inputs to the trailing arm ends of things. The other thing about this is people have asked, what's that big hole that's taped up on top of the trans? Well, these guys, from a packaging perspective, where's the differential? What's down in there? But what you're looking down into is the dry sump tank. They've actually built it into the transaxle, and what bolts on up here is the aerator for the dry sump system. It's completely trippy. And then if you look down here, you can see oil passageways running from the trans. There's a big seal that lives right there, obviously, and then into the bottom of the sump. That's the other thing is, look at, no sump, dry sump, yay. So motor sits really low in the car, relatively speaking, and that's why this becomes important. It gets the axles up where we want them. The other neat thing about this setup, one of the comments that came back on one of the posts was, you're going to put a 6-speed manual in it, right? You're not going to put an automatic in it. And it's interesting that I could put an automatic in it. One is, there's an F1 with their paddle shifted, quote, automatic gearbox. is called the F1 gearbox. It is 100% identical to this one, with the exception of this actuator. Ferrari went the same way as the BMWs did in the early paddle shifting days, which is it's the exact same transaxle, but they shift it with this contraption that bolts on in replacing the regular cable shift stuff. So it actually could be made into an automatic, but that's way complicated. There's all kinds of crazy computery junk, and this is just in more, I think it's more fitting to go with a manual setup for this build. What else can I tell you about this thing? There's some interesting stuff that I don't understand yet, like this thing at the back is hollow. Now, maybe there's something that in use in the Ferrari that for some reason takes advantage of that, or maybe it's because they needed it to mount something else that I'm not going to end up using. But it's just a fascinating thing. It also looks huge when you see it, and at first I thought there is no way this thing's going to fit inside a 914. And magically, as you saw from those pictures, it does. So this is going to be one heck of a ride, and it's going to be a super duper fun build. I can't wait to get started. But as I mentioned in the thread, the first thing we got to do is get this motor looked at by somebody that knows what they're doing to make sure there's no showstoppers in terms of either cost. Like a rebuild on this thing would probably be, I don't even want to guess, 30 grand. So I ain't doing that. But how cool is this? Just epic. Just epic. So anyway, thanks for watching. I'll keep you all posted and enjoy the ride. Take care.